That sounds like a moment. Welcome, everyone. Great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Mark Clegg. I'm the director of the Arts Initiative, and it's my pleasure to be the moderator of talking about Go Back and Fetch It by Rhiannon Giddens and Kristina Gaddy.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to start by acknowledging this is sort of a hard time in our culture and our world, and I know that I've been reading way too much news, so I'm hoping that this brings a little bit of hope and a little bit of possibility to our lives. I know the music making we were doing a little earlier was feeding my soul in that way, but I'm sure there will be moments when this talk also hits on some of those same topics. But our real purpose today is to celebrate the publication of this new book. Rhiannon, why don't you hold it up? We can all see it. Go Back and Fetch It. University of North Carolina Press. Co-written by our fantastic guest for today. So Kristina is an award-winning author of 3 books, which have all appeared since 2020, which I really want to know how that's possible, because it takes me about 10 years to write a book. So the fact you can write 3 amazing books in just 5 years is really amazing to me. But Kristina's an amazing writer, a real sort of storyteller of history, I would say, sort of a creative nonfiction, which I didn't really think was a thing. But you have a way of making history really come alive through the characters that you talk about. And we have all the books that we're going to talk about today are for sale by Schuler Books. After the talk, you'll be able to go pick those up. We'll have a little book signing. But it's not only Go Back and Fetch It, but actually the other books that both of our authors have contributed. Rhiannon probably needs no introduction for anybody in this room, but I'm going to try anyway. Certainly a multi-instrumentalist, vocalist, composer, Grammy winner, MacArthur Genius Grant winner, Pulitzer Prize winner, all those things. But most important of all is that she's the University of Michigan Artist in Residence for this year. And her work on campus has been performing, but really scholarship, really doing research for a project, which again will probably come up. But I think that the model that she's really provided for our faculty and our students and our community, and what I really admire about really both of the work you do, is that it brings scholarship and performance together as a kind of alloy. You sort of can't have one without the other. And so in some ways we have someone who's probably mainly known as a performer and someone who's mainly known as a historian, but you actually come together in the middle and in ways that are blended and indistinguishable. But also, I think both of you, but especially I think, Rhiannon, what you've done for us on campus is that you model a kind of openness and creativity to possibility that isn't confined by all the little boxes that are culture, but also that universities tend to put people in, right? We're in certain disciplines, we're in certain departments, we're in certain majors, we have our role and we have to stay in our lane and do our thing where we have our expertise. And part of what you've done is blown that open in your own creativity in lots of different ways. So thank you for all you've done on our campus to show that. So one of the things I'm sure we're going to talk about today is origins. So how did this book come about? I mean, how did you guys first meet?
We first met in 2018, actually, when you programmed a little banjo symposium at the North Carolina Folk Festival.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. We were at that Airbnb.
Yeah.
All together.
Yeah.
And it was like fabulous.
Yeah. So you've known my partner, Pete Ross, who builds instruments for a long time, since 2005. Black Banjo
I guess it goes back
Gathering,
to that,
probably. And that banjo symposium was actually, I think, one of, an origin point of Well of Souls, just talking about that research, but really awesome to be in a space, and again, talking about that kind of interdisciplinary space, a space of scholars, performers, and just like having those dialogues and exchanges.
I have totally forgotten about that. It's amazing. I mean, girl be hustling. You know what I'm saying?
And like, she's busy.
You can't be an independent historian without be hustling.
So
no,
it's
you're hustling.
No,
you're
busy.
No, I'm just saying. We both hustle, but I'm just thinking. I'm always trying to create this, create the space in between, right? Yeah. Because there wasn't a space for us to do that work. And so it was like using the opportunity that comes your way as a performing artist to bring in the interdisciplinariness of, instrument making, scholarship, intersectionality.
Yeah.
And like, it's so great to remember that,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, because it was you had been asked, I think, to just curate music programs for the North Carolina Folk Festival, and you're like, yes, but also I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And it was really fantastic.
And then you guys helped me out with there's a 10-part banjo series on great courses that I filmed because I'm a crazy person. But we have a really great roundtable in one of those episodes. So this we're part of the community of the banjo reclamation community, trying to reclaim the history, the instrument, the music, and the culture.
Yeah, yeah.
So the title, Go Back and Fetch It, what are you going back, where, and what are you fetching?
The idea behind the book was that there was all of this little pieces of music in archives, in published books, in manuscripts that were, sprinkled throughout the historic record of Black music in the Americas. And they weren't compiled in one place. And, essentially, Rhiannon, frustrated as an artist of, I want to use this material, but I can't get it. I can't access it.
I just kept going back to Kristina's website where she'd put up these JPEGs, I was working on something for the new Ken Burns documentary that's coming out this November, and I kept like, and I'd go back to her website and like, there it is, and I'd lose the JPEG and I'd go back and like download it again, and then I was just like, Kristina, why don't we put all these in a book?
Yeah, and so those are the musical pieces spanning 1687 to 1867, and the idea of bringing those, but not doing it in just this purely historical way, which I think is, for me as a historian, like a really easy thing to do, to just be like, here they are on my website, enjoy. But instead thinking about, well, what's the purpose of having these? There is obviously the historic idea of like, you just have these for the sake of documenting history and proving that this music existed, first of all. Whether we want to rewrite history or not, we can't, it's there. But then the idea of bringing it into these performance contexts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea was to make the book that I wanted to have, like, personally. And it's so funny because as soon as it was made, I was just like immediately like, all right, and let me learn, I mean, because going through the tab, that we can get into that later, but just thinking about it and rereading it and going, refamiliarizing myself with all the Kristina's, hard work and research. And the idea of, I think we both, and one of the reasons why I love Kristina as a researcher and a writer is that she pushes back against black and white thinking and essentialism. The idea that, this is this and that is that, and they don't meet in the middle, or it's either this or that, when we have to hold a lot of different realities at the same time. And especially when you kind of go to this kind of history, the history of the underclass in general is ephemeral history, and largely negative. People who are poor are in the historical record when they are arrested, or when they run away, or when they're being noticed by, an elite from another country who doesn't know what they're doing. These kinds of things, very rarely they have their own voices represented. So this kind of work really needs the nuance and the comfortability about not being able to say something for certain. And I think Kristina's book, Well of Souls, was something that I felt like was an excellent example of taking kind of overwhelming examples. Like, there's actually quite a lot for how little there is. You know what I mean? In terms of proving a thesis, but like doing it in a way where you walk in going, okay, we don't know what we don't know, but here's what we do know. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
I was curious, so during the process of writing the book, or maybe finding the material originally, what was one thing that surprised you the most about the history of the banjo, or the history of this music that you knew in some ways so intimately?
For Go Back and Fetch It. I think that I think the thing that was the most surprising and the best to me about this was really and this is gonna sound like I'm like rephrasing this question, but was the collaboration and was figuring out, you know, what did it sound like, right? Like we none of the banjos from the earliest period that exist can be put into playable conditions. So we don't know what they sounded like. So we make these replicas. But then the question becomes, well, what did people play on them? How were they tuned? That was when I was touring for Well of Souls. That was one of the most popular questions was, how were early banjos tuned? And we have some clues from, you know, the historical record, but they're like literally 2. And so the idea that we take this music that we know was played by Black musicians and we think about, and some of them, you know, wouldn't have been played on banjo, and we can, you know, accept that and know that. But, you know, having them put onto banjo tab, or regardless, having them put onto banjo tab showed something about the music and yeah, makes you want to play it, makes you want to hear it, makes you want to think about the ways in which Western Standard Notation is sometimes subpar for, you know, how these tunes would have actually been played by the people who were playing them. And I think that getting that and getting them kind of all together in the space of this book, like opened up kind of an auditory landscape for me that I hadn't quite been paying attention to as much as my other, you know, senses as I tried to think about the world that the banjo inhabited.
I mean, it's really interesting to think about, you know, banjo tab with some of these tunes. The focus of banjo tab is the position of the left hand and the technique of the right hand. It's not the notes, right? Because they're numbers, so it's positions. It's where the fingers fit on the fingerboard, and it means if your banjo's tuned in one key, then it's going to be in that key. If it's tuned in another key, it's going to be that key. But the fingering is all the same. And what really I just thought of this as you were talking about that, and something that really is the connection there is when I went to the Gambia to study the accounting, which is a banjo ancestor. You know, all of the banjos were tuned, had different tunes, like different starting notes, but all the relationships were the same. So for them, they weren't thinking like this is the exact note that you start on. They think this is the exact position that you start on, right? And I just literally made that connection like right now. And it's like the banjo is a different instrument than you know what I mean in terms of why tab for the banjo rather than standard notation. You know what I mean? It is because of all the different kinds of banjos that you have and the focus on the relationship between the strings, which, you know, at least for me, that is a connection that goes all the way back to Africa, which I think is very interesting.
Well, since we've talked about it, let's introduce the reproduction of the earliest banjo you have up here, because I think that might be something that surprises people.
Yeah, so this is one that my husband, Pete Ross,
Pete, you want to wave so we know you're there? That's Pete.
Yeah, I did have to think about that for a second. We've been together a long time, but we just got married, so. But anyway, so he didn't actually make it for me, though. He made it for the television production of Colson Whitehead's book, The Underground Railroad.
You probably couldn't afford him, I'm guessing.
No, I couldn't, but I could buy it back from the prop master for much reduced price. It was great.
Awesome.
But anyway, so it's slightly modified to be more playable for contemporary modern players. But essentially you have that gourd body, that skin soundboard, that flat fingerboard, the tuning pegs. It has kind of these basic the basic infrastructure of what we think of a 5-string banjo today, although this only has 4 strings. But you know, that's what they would have looked like, would have sounded like, would have been played in pretty intimate spaces, not necessarily in what we think of as kind of like social performance, right? It would have been a group performance, people playing music, playing this instrument, playing drums, playing other percussion, dancing, singing all together. There's really no separation between audience and musician. Yeah. We're all part of that same,
Well, and one of the big points you make in your book is that this is an African-American instrument. So It has African roots, African, But it's that little string, right, that makes
The
the difference?
little, well, it's a lot of it. It's the little string, but it's also, I mean, there's shorter strings, but the shorter string with the tuning peg, and then we see some of this, like, I call it technology, right? A flat fingerboard, and skin soundboard, gourd bodies. Like, we see tuning pegs. We see all of these things on African instruments, but it's not until we get to the Americas that all of these things come together, and we think, you know, that actually makes a lot of sense, right? We have creolized food, we have creolized language, we have creolized instruments, and therefore we also have creolized music, where we're not just taking, you know, whole cloth this tradition and putting it here. We are taking many African traditions and combining them, and we are taking that, and you can't exclude the language, music, knowledge of the enslavers and the oppressors in that as well.
So all the pieces were there, but the particular combination is unique
Yeah.
to the African American context.
Yeah, well, I mean, Afro-Caribbean and
yeah.
American,
African.
really. But it's a crucible, right? So what people don't understand is that, I mean, Africa is an enormous continent, and people were taken from all over. They would have, like, already, the creolization process is starting, like, at the slave castles, you know, on the coasts, right? Because people are thrown in together. Maybe they don't speak the same language. They've been marched for thousands of miles from inland or wherever. Same language, same religion. Do they have the same cultural ideas, right? So they're already having to figure out how to talk to each other. And then they're all having a common cause against the folks who are enslaving them. And then they get into a whole nother world, right? Whole nother world they've never seen. They have no idea how to get back home. They've been in the trauma of the Middle Passage, right? So, you know, even more than food, because, like, so many of these people were children.
They were very young.
Very young. And that's another thing people don't understand, is that the children were the valuable ones because they knew that they could survive. There's a certain kind of age range, right? You don't know how to cook as a child, but you know how to sing and you know how to play, right? So it, even more than food ways, children and young people carry music and dance as part of their cultural heritage, you know, in a way that they can then start to figure out, okay, how can we find a commonality of purpose, of spiritualism, to combat this horrific crucible of Caribbean slavery, because it's particularly bad in the Caribbean, right? I mean, it's bad everywhere, but it's particularly bad there, right? So people are dying at high rates. So this is, I say this is, like, it is one of the most important things to know about the banjos, the work that Kristina and like people like Dana Epstein have, you know, laying the foundation for that, have done, is to understand how important spiritually this was, you know, for people. And, like, when you look at the banjo as its whole story, why it's important to know where it started, because then we can understand where it's gone and why it's treated in the way that it's treated sometimes.
Well, and I'd say that's what surprised me about the book, was the spiritual dimension of the banjo. So I came through the banjo through bluegrass. I mean, would have heard on the radio, like, when I was a kid, Dueling Banjos from Deliverance was on the radio, even though it had a guitar player in it and not two banjos. But, you know, but to me, it was a kind of virtuosic instrument. It was a very sparkling performance instrument. It was not, you know, I had no context with it as a spiritual instrument. So the fact that, like, the very first piece in the book has that spiritual resonance, and from the very beginning, you can see that community aspect of call and response built into the music, right? Which, when I'm teaching classes in music history here, and we're talking about some of the primary characteristics of African American music, that call and response is part of it, for the reason you just brought up, which it's not about performers and an audience. It's about people coming together through music.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a thought, but it flew away.
But can you talk, Rhiannon, a little bit about that spiritual dimension and how the banjo sort of feeds that? I mean, it's very present in your music.
Kristina remembers, she sent me her book, because there's a foreword or blurb or something. I wrote something for it. And
You wrote a very nice foreword.
Because I believe every word of that foreword. But it was because, like, she sent me the book so that I could read it, so that I could write, the foreword. I knew it was something. And I literally cried, because, and I wrote back, and I was just like, absolutely, you know, and it was shorter than I think they wanted, but, like, I just said what I had to say. Because, and what I had to say was, I feel like it couldn't have been any stronger, because, like, what I felt when I picked up my axe, this is, and this is a problem. This is from a problematic period of history, but like a lot of people who look like me played this exact kind of instrument. You know what I mean? So there's so many connections, but like I have a gourd banjo, and I felt the same thing when I picked up my gourd banjo, is there's this, I do feel like whenever I pick it up, there's like an invocation that comes, there's like a tune that falls out of it. There's a moment of I just kind of play a little something and it feels like it's conjuring something. I mean, like I have felt that so many times, and I have felt just the richness of the sound and all of these things, and thinking about it, that it was a spiritual connection for me. It's the reason why I've written the songs that I've written about ancestral culture. And so to read it, and it's not like I need a Western book to tell me that I'm right about my own music and culture, but like it was the way that it was written and the understanding of it, and it's just the elucidation. It's like here's the light shining on these ancestors. Like this is not like I'm codifying this into print, so therefore it's real. It's like no, I'm shining a light on this history, and that tells you that your instincts are not crazy.
And I think that's, for me, that was it's an important thing, which is, it's not to say this is it's the end all be all, it's the only thing. Like there's more to be done. There's always more to be done. But the idea, and there's like been so many stories of friends where like their introduction to the banjo has occurred in these like kind of almost magical circumstances, or they have this like real call feeling to the instrument and how it sounds. And again, I don't think anybody needs like a reason to say this is the instrument that I want to play, or this is the music that I want to play. And you don't need anybody to tell you that. You don't need a book to tell you that. But it is also really helpful to have it and that it exists, and to say this music, and with Go Back and Fetch It, this music is here, was here, and we're acknowledging it, and we're making that shining that light on it, and telling people this is the reality, and we need to acknowledge that. And it's not, I think that shining the light is also nice because it's like it's not this story that's over in the periphery. Mm-hmm. This is the story of America.
This is the story. Yeah.
It's right here in the middle, and we need to make sure that we remember that.
So, Rhiannon, as you translated these melodies, which are often written in Western European notation, into tablature, into your fingers, into the instrument, were there certain characteristics or certain messages that you learned from the music that's different from other music you may have studied?
Well, I've been studying the early banjo music from the 1850s, music that is commonly attached to minstrelsy, which is why it hasn't really been addressed as what it is, which is our early music. Mm-hmm. Like Europe has early music, we have early music too, and it's not just colonial tunes, you know what I mean? Yeah. We have all of these banjo tunes. The thing is, like, minstrelsy is only codifying and commercializing a cultural music and dance that's already happening. A cultural exchange that's happening between mostly working class people who have nothing and who are creating this American life for themselves. Black people, Irish people, other poor whites, brown people, Indians. Like it's coming out of this soup of folks making it for themselves, and then it becomes codified and combined with blackface theatrical minstrelsy. So we don't like to touch it unless we are, going to do Civil War reenactments or something. I don't know. But like I've been engaging with the music as music, and just like tossing the words out, and so there are these banjo tutors from the 1850s. So it's basically, the banjo is a black instrument, for a couple hundred years. And it's only the 1820s and 30s that really starts to make a shift into like the dominant culture. And so you start seeing things like banjo tutors. Like, if you don't have a black person to learn from, here you go. Like, here's how you do it, They don't actually say that. I just say that because it's funny. But it's like, so they're basically saying this is how you play the minstrel banjo. So it's a very useful document of what banjo technique was for the commercial stage, but obviously that's coming from something. They're not just making it up, So a lot of the techniques that I learned, and they're very different to clawhammer. They've pretty much died in clawhammer banjo, like the old time banjo playing. This is called stroke style, what is used for minstrel. So it's still used with the back of the fingernail, you know. But the strings are gut string, would have been gut strings in the skinhead. So there's a lot more give. There's a lot more, what's interesting is in that music, there's a lot more triplet action. There's a lot more 3 versus 2. There's wandering ones. It's like really the repository, that's the next book, the repository of a lot of the friction between African and European music
That
in
rhythmic
general.
sensibility, yeah.
Absolutely. That's where it all lives there. And all of that's ironed out in a certain way as it becomes old time music. Mm-hmm. So and old time
even
music
late period minstrelsy like Stephen Foster,
right?
like
It's starting to go.
Yeah.
You know, like so I Dream of Jeannie with the soft brown or whatever. That's not have any of these techniques in it really. And I'm not saying old time music's not complicated. It's just a different kind of complexity exists in it. That was published in 1855. You would not recognize any of our folk songs from it. You know what I mean? And you hear the clave, you hear the triplets, you hear all of that stuff. So I took those techniques and I kind of retconned them onto some of these tunes. And it was kind of remarkable how well they fit some of these tunes. You know, it's just like a lot of thumb technique, a lot of, you know, being able to stroke down, you know, where you don't do that in clawhammer. You know, but there were some tunes that you just could not play without doing that, you know. So. Do you want to play Poor Rosie? Oh yeah. What tuning is on? It's in major, so I have to go. Just make sure I don't mess it up. See, it's like that's why we made this book.
I think it's the last one.
It's one of the last. It's one of the last ones, yeah. Just in case, I don't want to embarrass myself. Hold on.
By the way, you should know that's my copy of the book, and Rhiannon stole it from me because she hasn't gotten one yet.
I have like a one of those where they're like, "This is what it's going to look like. Are you happy?"
Yeah, and and the answer. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. You know, advanced copies, there's mistakes. There's mistakes. I'll just say that. So we get you a real copy where there's no mistakes.
Poor Rosie, poor gal, Rosie, break my poor heart. Heaven shall be my home. So all the techniques that I learned from the minstrel stuff really comes into play there, right? It's just like there's a reliance on thumb technique that really makes that tune sing out. You know what I mean? So it's just like I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to you know, it's a creative act. It's like, you know, Kristina always says the tabs were a creative act because we'll never know how people may have played these. If they would have played some of them on the banjo, we'll never know. But it means it's a historically based creative act, if you know what I mean. Like it's like with as much knowledge as I have, you know. Also as an apprentice of Joe Thompson, who was, you know, a proponent of black string band music, one of the last of, you know, of an era. So.
Well, I love you're talking about the future. And I want to, when I was taking, so I did my undergrad here in Michigan, and my very first class was a literature class. And the professor of that class named Jeff was very influential on me. And one of the things he had us do was always look at the first page of every novel, right? So we'd be looking at Moby Dick, and you'd look at that first sentence, call me Ishmael, or whatever, I'd have to pull that out, or I am the invisible man. So when I saw the first sentence of your book, I was like, that was a surprise. So here's the first sentence. Afrofuturism asks us to imagine a future grounded in Black culture. So that one of the interesting things about your book is that it's not just about going back and fetching it, but it's fetching it for the future, fetching it for recreating, for creating something new.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to mention that go back and fetch it is an Akan proverb, Sankofa. So it's go back and fetch it and bring it forward. It's not enough to go back. You have to bring it forward. There's the only point to any of this is if people take it and do something grounded yet new with it,
Yeah, and that was really the idea. Is it's not. I mean, there could have been a book which is just like without the tab, let's say, and without the cleaned up transcriptions, which is just like, here is this music, but that's not inviting people to play it. And I think that the way that Rhiannon's done this music is really an invitation, and you say as much in your musical introduction of this is an invitation to play this music, not necessarily to just play it the way that it is on the page, but can we take, the melody of Poor Rosie, and the lyrics are amazing, but put different lyrics on it, or create it, as your friend Newell has done.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I was just with the kora player, Sekou Keita, who's incredible, and I said, I pulled this book out, I told him the story, I played Poor Rosie, and then he immediately wrote this unbelievably beautiful invocation to sing during the B parts and played the kora. And it's just like, if it wasn't for this, that wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? And like, that's the point. And so now that's a whole new life for Poor Rosie, because like people hear the story and then they're going to put their own spin on it, but like when you have the grounding, you can fly, but you have to have the grounding. And that's what Kristina's done with this historical, and what I've done through the tab is like, we have put as much historical grounding that we can in it so that people can then take it, but you can't just take it. It's both of those things. And there's some of that is happening, I feel, in our culture. It's like we need to be grounded in something to make the biggest leap, I think.
I'm going to ask one more question, but then we're going to open it up to the floor. So I just want to ask those who are running the mics to get ready, because we do have a live stream audience. So raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you and you can ask the question. But Rhiannon, you just opened up the notion of like, what does this say for us today? And I think as I was looking at the music, I was thinking about the people who made it and that how little power they had. Some of the lyrics that you quote in that, it's like, mass is gonna kill me, right? There's real physical fear. To play this music at all was a kind of act of hope and act of resistance. Some of the lyrics you have in there, some of the lyrics are untranslatable, some of them are actually pretty racist lyrics. And I wonder how much those were a scrim for what was really being sung underneath. But the fact that creating this music at all has a kind of a vitality of human spirit that I think has something to tell us today, and I just wanted to invite you to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, music was resistance. It was not tolerated. It was not allowed. Even black fiddlers who were enslaved, they were doing that as part of their labor. I can kind of, begin to imagine things that they might have done to subvert their labor. But I was just actually emailing with your colleague Henry about an occasion in New Orleans where a banjo was part of a police raid where a bunch of people were arrested for dancing in 1817, and a banjo was one of the objects that was taken. And that was actually a reference that I hadn't seen before, so I was very excited by that. But that's what we have banjos that are destroyed or confiscated because they are part of music making, because they are part of religious resistance, social resistance, and so that really is the history of this music.
And it's powerful. Like, the banjo is powerful because of how it came about. It is powerful no matter where it goes. So it ends up in Appalachia, right? It ends up in what we call hillbilly music, but it was just really music played by people in the mountains, right? There were black people in the mountains, there were brown people, there were all sorts of people in the mountains.
And this is something that record companies faked us out of, right? Because they divided music into race music, black music, and then old-timer white music, right?
I mean, I would argue
and that's
that
not how
I would,
it was
I would
made.
argue that was even pre them.
Even before
yeah,
that.
even before that, these proto-ethnomusicologists would say this is the Appalachian music I want because it's ballads, because it and even sometimes they'd be like there'd be in the logging industry Italians that had migrated to Appalachia, and they'd be like, well, we don't want your music because you only got here 10 years ago, and we want these, even though it's already again amalgamating and becoming something new. But I digress.
No, I mean it's very important. Come to my lecture Thursday, and you'll learn more. But it's what I think is what's really important is that the banjo crosses the color line. The banjo becomes an instrument of working class resistance, no matter what. And therefore, I think it behooves us to look very carefully at why it has turned into a figure of comedy, right? Because you want to take the power out of something, you make fun of it. Mm-hmm. That's one reason why Appalachian culture has been made fun of, because that was one of the hotbeds of resistance, right? North Carolina, they were like, no, we're not into this, this supporting slavery thing. You know what I mean? So I think that it's also important to know the history for that, because it's it is a way that people came together. There's Cherokee hymns on the banjo. You know what I mean? It is an instrument that was adopted by working class people. And so we have to really be careful at how we look at it, how we talk about it. And this kind of history can really we can let go of some of that stuff, right. Because this is where it's at, and reclaiming that. People are already feeling that energy and that power, but you have to know it first.
Well, and if you want to control people, you divide them and turn them against each other.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
Gee, I wonder if that's ever happened.
Yeah, race is just a tool to enforce class. I mean, that's it.
All right, let's open up to some questions. Just raise your hand. Hi.
Oh, we're moderating. Sure. All right. Who's first? Now poor Rosie's in my head now.
Yeah, so
Hey y'all, thank you so much for this talk. It was really powerful talking about the spiritual dimensions of the banjo, and I think it's these kind of conversations that are really important right now. My question is about reclamation. I'm thinking about kind of trends that are happening with Black artists right now who are into reclaiming these genres that have Black cultural authorship but have been, whitewashed. And a question that I got is, when do we know if something has been reclaimed? Is there an end goal of reclamation? Is it an ongoing process? I'm just curious for you guys to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question, reclamation, what is it? And I think we have to think about the commercial aspects of music. Why are we reclaiming it? What are we doing with it? Are we using it as dressing for our next single or our next record? Not speaking about anybody in particular. Are we using it as, something to prove a point? Are we, you know what I'm saying? That's an individual thing. I think it's an individual thing, but we have forgotten how commercial music is and how consumable a product it is, and that it has been extracted from our everyday lives and made into a thing that we need to buy or consume, which is wrong. So I think one of the powerful things about the banjo, about any instrument, is it as a way for individuals to reclaim a piece of their culture, a piece of their art for themselves, no matter who is listening. And I think it has to start there. If you want to go play your banjo in your room for yourself, then you are reclaiming it. Where it goes, and if you're a performer, and if you're going to do this thing, and what, blah, 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 all of that is beside the point. For me, my most powerful moments of playing the banjo are when I'm composing on it for myself in my room, or when I'm playing and I'm just stuff is just falling out of it. That's, for me, reclamation.
nothing to add. I think that's great.
Any other questions?
I was chatting with Josie the other day, last week actually, and we were talking about the role of building a banjo, and I said that was one thing that we needed more of as people of color, building banjos, because my theory was that something of you seeps into an instrument when you build it. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, some of the black luthiers that are out there or that we should know about, or what your thoughts are on that.
There's a wonderful organization called the Black Banjo Reclamation Project, which Hannah Marie runs. You can look that up online. Dana Ross Jennings has led Gord banjo building workshops. I think she's kind of holding up on that for right now. Because she does a lot of things. So for right now, as far as I know, and I'm sure there's others, but from my understanding, a great place to start is the Black Banjo Reclamation Project, because they have organized, I think they've already done the one for this year, but they've organized a week where you go build your own banjo. And I think that's a powerful thing, because all banjos were handmade until the 1840s or whenever they started to become commercial instruments.
And people really making them for themselves. Like
yes.
And we know people, we have friends who've also done that, kind of just like decided, my friend Art in Nova Scotia, just like, I want one of these, I'm going to make it. And Amanda Ewing is an amazing black violin maker, fiddle maker, and so she actually just pretty recently finished a violin fiddle for Darcy Ford, who's out in California, and Darcy played on that. They actually also played Poor Rosie on that just last weekend with a group called the Black Banjo and Fiddle Fellowship, and she related publicly how special it was to play this music on this instrument that was built by a black woman. And I think that is something hopefully that will continue increasing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah.
And just to say, that fellowship is through the Oakland Public Conservatory that's run by Dr. Angela Wellman.
Yeah.
So there's incredible work being done. But the difference between what was happening 20 years ago when the Black Banjo Gathering kind of like sparked me and a bunch of other people is kind of amazing. There's also Brandy Waller-Pace, who runs the Fort Worth African American Music, what is it called?
African American
Music Festival.
Roots Music
Festival at Fort Worth.
I
I had my own festival, Biscuits and Banjos, that happened this past April, which was an incredible moment of people of all colors coming together, and allies and all sorts of things. It was really beautiful.
And I also think with the instrument making thing, we have to think about how much Pete's going to talk to me about this later, but how much privilege it takes to be able to make an instrument. He spent many years learning how wood grain works, because you can't just pull out any piece of wood and do it. Learning how gourds work, what gourds are good for building, which ones aren't, how thick the skin should be. There's an amazing amount of kind of apprenticeship and time that goes into it, and we're talking again just 20 years since Black Banjo Gathering, 2005, and even within that period, there was a lot of music making, but that interest in instrument building hadn't started taking. So I think this is our period where, because of all of these resources, that's going to start growing, and hopefully in even just a few years' time, we see more black luthiers who are making these kind of traditional instruments.
Because there's making one for yourself, and then there's making them for other people. I think they're those two different.
Yeah, and that is two different things.
I think it's two different things.
But I do think it's incredibly important, for the whole experience.
Totally. Question?
In terms
Catchy.
of researching the book and deciding like what pieces you were gonna put in there, like where did you even start?
We started with the things that we knew
All the stuff on your
had,
website.
yeah, exactly, that had to be there.
Yeah.
Like Sloan, the book, the stuff that comes out of his book. We should stop calling it Sloan. We should call it Mr. Baptiste's music. Mr. Baptiste's music, 1687. Like that was definitely like, okay, we have to have that. And then for me personally, I thought it was really important to end with these songs that are from slave songs. Well, I wanted two endings. I wanted one that was from Slave Songs of the United States, 1867, which is the work of abolitionists who are like, we have to collect this black music that we've been hearing in the South because the end of slavery is going to change things and we need to preserve this music. And also with Snowden's Jig, I thought that those were the end points. And then a lot of stuff we had to figure out what to choose in between, and it wasn't always easy because there were certain tunes, like we were talking about Whoop Jamboree today at lunch, which is this piece that is from one of these minstrel books, but it's like, this is not like the others. There's something special about this, but can we substantiate that? No, so we can't include it. And there's other pieces like that, and pieces that were like just like 1870, and it was like, well, maybe that's just outside of the frame. So there were a number of things like that where we had to kind of pull back. But I think that there's also, you know, going to be things that come up. I mean, I really hope that, my hope is always that this stuff brings more, that then I get Henry, you know, saying, hey, I found this reference, or getting some other scholar saying, wait, have you seen this? One of the pieces that is in here, these pieces from St. Bartholomew, that happened because I was writing that book, and my dad, my mom's from Sweden, and so he was reading about Swedish colonialism and St. Bartholomew, and he found this piece of music that I had never seen, heard of another scholar had seen, and it was like, whoa, okay, where does this fit in to this bigger picture? And that's just what I hope keeps happening.
I mean, because your history is a science. It's just like science. Like you make a hypothesis and you support it with all the evidence that you have at hand, and then you publish it, and then somebody else goes, oh, hey, I can support that, and here's more. Or actually, I have something that you probably need to see because it's going to, like, you know.
Yeah, hopefully they do that before you. No,
right, but you know, but like you don't know until you put it out there, and then you have to amend your hypothesis. I mean, this is like, you know, since the very first book about the banjo, the scholarship has really just enriched and filled in so much, and we've had to kind of go that way. Well, actually, maybe no, okay, you know, and it takes the work of a community.
We have time for one more?
One more question. Here's one. I'm like,
my question is not very deep. I've heard you use a term, it might be jargon. I'm not familiar with music.
oh, goody.
I think you used the terms, it sounded something like banjo tab, T-A-B. What is tab?
So that's a really good question, and I'm glad that you asked it. We tend to get kind of tunnel visioned and forget. So
Here, I'll
Yeah.
hold in your point.
yeah, so a lot of the original pieces of what we've done here would have been like put out like this. So like standard Western notation, like you'd see
Treble clef.
in treble clef, bass clef,
Any,
notes.
any music that you pick up by Mel Bay is going to look like that.
Right.
Almost.
So it's not really helpful for the banjo unless you're playing like 1880s like classic banjo stuff. It's not helpful for the banjo because there's so many different kinds of banjos. They're in different keys, they're in different tunings. And so what's more helpful is instead of saying what note it is you say where you put your fingers on the fingerboard.
And I want to just add, like, this is not a new thing. This is for the music students in here know this. This is a very old way of showing, even there used to even be, you know, keyboard tab that it just showed you where to press on the keyboard.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah, so it's like, you know, you've got the lines that represent the strings, and it's like, okay, so 2, that means that you put your finger here. And then, you know, the rhythm is kind of the same as Western notation. That's just one way to, you know, figure it out. So it shows you the relationships between the notes rather than the notes themselves. So that means I can play the same tab on this banjo, on
the banjo,
modern banjo, as long as it's got the same number of strings and the same relationship between the strings, the key will change depending on the banjo.
And it's just not to say people shouldn't read music, but it is just a way to make it more accessible. And that was a choice that we made with this was, okay, yes, we know that not all banjo players can read this or
want to read it.
Yeah, or want to read it. But we're gonna have it here because it almost is like it gives a framework of, okay, I'm gonna put my finger there and play it. Okay, I hear the note and just work. I mean, I'm not very proficient at reading tab, so I just use it and like I hear it or I play it on my fiddle and then look at the tab. I'm like, oh, okay, that's how it sounds, and this is where Rhiannon's telling me to put my fingers. So okay, now I can do it.
And the nice thing about it is that the numbers, tell you where you put the fingers. The articulation, that's what I've added, right?
Yeah, the right hand stuff.
Right, the right hand stuff. There's all these little dots and dashes and stuff that I've taken from that early banjo technique. You can forget all of it if you want, because the most important thing is where you put your fingers on the left, on the fingerboard. So it really just opens it up to however you want to engage with it.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, there are no recordings of this music from the 17th, 18th century,
No,
right?
and it wouldn't have
Shockingly,
been. It
no.
wouldn't have been. It wasn't intended. This music is not 12-tone scale. 4 beats to a measure. Music. That's not even Mr. Baptiste, who puts this, is a black man likely trained in the Catholic Church as a musician, so he understands how liturgical music works and can write this stuff. But he can also hear these things and be like, okay, on a fretless instrument, you can play lots more things. You're gonna have rhythms in that are not what you're used to in kind of European music of that time, or even religious music of that time.
Oh my God, there's one of the Coromantese is like bananas.
Yeah.
It's so clear that he's really trying to put it down, but there's just...
And there's another one I was telling the class earlier today that I visited. Like, there's one where it's like, there's no time signature because the person who wrote it down was like, I don't know. I can't count. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. It was like, it's something else, and I'm just going to leave it to you to figure out.
Which I really appreciate, actually.
Yeah, don't force it.
Well, that's fantastic. We're going to running out of time, unfortunately. One of the things I wanted to tell you is that this is not your last opportunity here, Rhiannon, this week. So, Rhiannon, actually, can you go to the slide for there we go. The Michigan Arts Festival launches on Thursday. This is a month-long, campus-wide festival. There's all sorts of stuff happening. But it kicks off with Rhiannon's talk at the Michigan Theater at 5:30, which you can learn some more, go deep on some of this creolization of this music, all the people who came together, sort of a lot of these issues around class and race in American music. So Michigan Theater, it holds roughly 1,600 people, so I'm sure all of you are going to fit. So please come to that. But there is lots and lots of great art happening at the University Museum of Art. There's an amazing exhibit of Native American, African, and Cuban artists called Both Sides of the Line. Stacy Kirby, who's our WIT residency artist, is doing a performance piece called Bureau of Personal Belonging at the Stamps Gallery. We have the play Gloria being presented by SMTD, Verdi's Requiem Mass at Hill Auditorium on Friday, with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra and our own choral union. So just lots and lots of stuff at arts.umich.edu/fest. So we have a little surprise here. You may have seen that there's some students in the front row with some musical instruments. We're gonna do a tune which is prominent in the book, a tune that was performed by Solomon Northup, preserved in his book, 12 Years a Slave. And
I just want to say, like, this is one of these things where it's like, this is just this little piece. It is a little, shirt of a pot, and that's all we have. Because Solomon Northup is very, he says, Roaring River, Northup wrote, was a refrain of the Red River Plantation and would have been played for dances and other occasions. And so, He's enslaved for 12 years. A lot of times, his labor is to play music, and not just the music that he knows, but to learn new songs. And yet he only includes one in his printed book. And so we have that one, but I can just imagine that in this area of Louisiana where he was, okay, this was their favorite, but they had 10 others that they played. And then the next plantation, there were people who were enslaved who were making different music and had different songs. And so all we have is this one Roaring River.
So let me welcome Professor Brad Phillips and the Roots Music class from the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. I'm going to let them have the last word, but just so you know, right after the performance, you can go out through those doors in the middle. There's a reception out back. We have friends from Schuler Books would have books by both of our authors, including Go Back and Fetch It, but also Well of Souls, The History of the Banjo, a couple children's books that Rhiannon has written. You'll want to take advantage of those. They will be signing copies for you if you want to stick around. And please support our local bookstore by picking up a copy yourself, but we're just going to let them take over.
Sorry, it's always me.
But also, unlike the students, Rhiannon and I haven't learned this one well enough, so we're both looking at the music. So these kids are all right.
To be fair, I'm playing it in a totally different fingering.
That's true.
Because I'm
That's true.
playing an instrument that is not in the right key.
Yeah, fair. Okay, so I'm the only one who doesn't know.
No, I'm just saying.
please join us for the reception, and please read the book and talk to our co-authors outside. Thank you so much for your students.